Welcome to Ashley on CBD, your one-stop podcast where we drop the truth on all things CBD and maybe some pop culture too. Stick around as we delve deep into the practical health benefits of CBD for you.
Welcome to the show. Thank you for listening. Today's episode, as always, is brought to you by Magic Immuna Tea, available at packedwithlife.com. What could be more important in today's world than having a strong immune system? Probably nothing. But how do you do that? Diet, exercise? Well, no kidding. But what I've recently started doing is drinking Magic Immuna Tea. Number one, it tastes great, and it's loaded with healthy nutrients called adaptogens, including 4 essential mushrooms, reishi, lion's mane, chaga, and cordyceps. No, not the magic kind, you guys. Come on. Reishi, lion's mane, chaga, and cordyceps are great for you. Highly nutritious and very adept at boosting your immune system. So give Magic Immuna Tea a try at packedwithlife.com. Today's show is with Mollie McGlocklin of sleepisaskill.com. It's a great conversation around one of the most common things that people struggle with in today's world, which is with sleeping. Mollie provides some great insight. We talk about cannabis and CBD and the role there, but also she shares several things from her experience around helping people achieve better sleep that I think our audience will find quite valuable. So I hope you enjoy the show today. Thank you. Hi, Mollie.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. This is awesome. I'm so glad that we were able to set this up, and you're kicking this up. This is a newer podcast for you guys, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, amazing. Well, I'm very excited to be a part of the kickoff, the launch. So that's awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining. I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah, me too. So this will be great. Very cool.
So, well, let's just dive into it, right? So tell me about how you came to incorporate cannabis or CBD into, and I refer to them interchangeably because obviously CBD is cannabis, and I think that's helpful to people in terms of understanding and destigmatizing this whole thing. But how did you incorporate that into your expertise around sleep?
Yeah, great question. So probably helpful to know where, my interest in sleep in general came from. And basically the company, the creation of Sleep as a Skill, started from really solving my own problem with my sleep. And that was that for many, many years, I just thought of myself as lots of labels: a bad sleeper, a short sleeper, a night owl, sleep anxious, all of these sort of things around my sleep. And, but I didn't think too much of it throughout most of my life until I went through a period of insomnia for around 3 to 4 months straight while traveling internationally. And it just really was one of my my personal rock bottom moments, and how, really was meant. Right. Yeah. And how it was really manifested was through that just inability, perceived inability to sleep. And that's where that sleep anxiety label came up from. I began to actually, like, the sun would be setting and my heart would start beating faster of like, what is tonight going to look like? I'm not going to be able to sleep and all of this sort of stuff. And it was a really kind of scary and disempowering time in my life. And when I went to the doctors in Croatia, I couldn't even speak the language. And so I'm going in there with Google Translate. And I leave with a prescription of their version of Ambien. And it was kind of in that moment of, okay, so what is the plan here? What am I going to be doing to actually, ensure that I'm not taking this sort of stuff, over the long term? But there wasn't a ton of guidance on the ground, at least in my experience, of what to do. And I was actually looking for almost like, support groups or, someone to speak to about like, what do you do in these situations? So and flash forward, was able to, really go down the rabbit hole of fix and really correcting what was not working for my sleep. And then transforming that into now measurably, I have a lot of different trackers around my sleep and being able to now quantifiably having some of the best sleep that I've ever had. And certainly now being able to work with so many other people on that. So through that process, really what I became really fascinated by was chronobiology and the science of time, and understanding that our circadian rhythm is something that exists on a spectrum. It's either weak or strong circadian rhythm. And that many of us are, certainly in the West, arguably finding ourselves more on the weak side of our circadian rhythm. And that certainly was me, and was living really upside down to the normal schedules of, what we would look to create as diurnal creatures, meaning that we're meant
So
to
weak rhythm means no sleep,
a weak
or
circadian.
leads to lack of sleep.
So a weak circadian rhythm simply kind of points to that your body is not at a place where just countably you're getting tired at the same time, you're waking up at the same time, sort of intrinsically, and that your hormones are all kind of functioning so that your cortisol is rising in the morning, like almost natural coffee, and then your melatonin, and then dropping in the evening, the cortisol, and then in the evening shifting over to a nice steady rise in melatonin so that you can drift off to sleep easily and effortlessly. But many of us don't have sort of that strong functionality as much as we used to have in hunter-gatherer days, or certainly just even prior to electricity, really, and the ability to augment our days so artificially. So what happens then is our hormones can go amok, our glucose levels can go all over the place, our moods can shift, and our ability to just know ourselves to go to bed at around the same time and wake up around the same time doesn't really happen. Whereas if we have a strong circadian rhythm, then it's almost just automated for us. It's those friends of ours that might, you go out and then they always still wake up at the exact same time, or they're always still going to bed at the same time despite what's going on around them. So we're looking to improve the strength of that circadian rhythm so that a lot of the thinking is taken out of the conversation. So for me, when realizing that this circadian rhythm entrainment element plays such a big factor into the results of our sleep, then one, I was really empowered because there's so many behavioral changes that I could make to make a difference. And two, then being able to get connected to a measurement system of, what are my results around my sleep. But on the conversation around CBD or cannabis, then one of the things that I found to be really, really helpful with that is that it can provide a natural option to have kind of a healing process around our relationship to looking for something external for our sleep. So for many of us, and certainly I was, no different, that I was looking for like the quick fix or the supplement or the pill,
just
or
help me go to sleep now.
Help me go to sleep now. And what has been really helpful with CBD is then that can provide also a number of benefits from the anti-inflammatory side of things, pain management side of things. I have a number of clients that it's a multifaceted problem around their sleep. So they might have some arthritis or endometriosis or all these other things that bring up pain flare-ups that can impact their sleep quality. So then having that natural sort of anti-inflammatory, but also its ability to work on the endocannabinoid system and the rhythms that it helps regulate can be really a place for people to stand that's separate from going straight to hypnotics or benzodiazepines, which a lot of people find themselves on with sleep issues. And it also has been something that people have been able to utilize to help wean themselves off in the long sort of tapering process for people that have been on those type of drugs for a long time. To give them something that can help assist with that is a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. I excuse me, I'm going to mute while I cough.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Been there.
Yeah. And well, thank you for that. I was just going to say, I've been involved in the CBD world for about 5 years now, and was fortunate to be exposed to, just thousands and thousands of people and their experience, anecdotally around CBD in particular. And universally, the number one thing people talk about when they start taking CBD is that I sleep better.
Yeah.
It just, it's just by far and away the number one thing that people say, even if that's not what they're taking it for. Right. And people are always kind of worried about that because they're like, well, I don't necessarily want to go to sleep in the middle of the day, but my pain is in the middle of the day. And it's like, well, that's not how it works, right? It doesn't put you to sleep. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. So really great point because it's not innately a sedative or, it doesn't have that kind of quality to it. Instead, what it seems to help with, particularly for a lot of the clients that I'm working with, is that kind of low grade anxiety or sympathetic, kind of nervous system response throughout the day and going into the evening. And of course, that is counter to what we were, discussing around what we want to kind of cultivate of that drop in cortisol and rise in melatonin into the evening to kind of set the stage for sleep to appear because sleep is a process by which we're kind of lowering the hertz output in our brains to then shift over to this weird twilight state that our brains go into when we sleep, and to do that really does require a relaxation process of the body in prep for that. So things like cannabis and CBD that can help mitigate some of the anxiety that we might be experiencing throughout the course of the day can often help make a difference to bringing that cycle back into place. And then there's still a lot of unknowns around CBD and its function. And I keep saying CBD, and of course, I know some people will be referring to cannabis and for their results with their
Sure.
sleep, depending. But certainly, there's still questions with the endocannabinoid system and how that all works. We're still, there's still exploration and the understanding of that, but it seems to very much be a rhythm based element. So understanding that we can help normalize some of that rhythm process and some of the benefits that seem to come from things like CBD for that are really, really not to be overlooked.
Yeah, I think it comes down to, or may come down to, who knows? We need more science to understand it, right? But in my hypothesis, based on my experiences, it comes down to it's basically helping your body get back to its natural, as you say, rhythm. Um, and that's why people think, well, how can it be such a miracle solution for so many things, right? I don't believe that. There's no way that it can possibly, nothing works for that many different things. And I've always kind of thought, well, it's because different people have different outcomes based on the same sort of issue. If we're deficient perhaps in cannabinoids, then maybe your ability to handle anxiety is affected, whereas my ability to sleep might be affected versus somebody else's ability to deal with recovery or pain in the knees or joints, right? It's we don't know, but what we do know is that all of these things seem to have a common denominator in that cannabis is helping restore the body back to its basic central point. They call it homeostasis, right? But it's
Yes.
What I don't really understand how to really say that in a way that people can understand it better, but other than I love the term rhythm, right? So I guess just talk to me about that. What is your reaction there?
Yeah, so there are some interesting. So we're still lacking on the number of studies to really be able to point to, and I'm hoping that in the future, the more and more different states are legalizing in the U.S. anyway, that the more and more we'll start to see money being put towards the ability to have some of these more larger scale studies. But even on some of the smaller scale studies, there's been evidence supporting the influence of circadian rhythms on the level of endocannabinoids and just the ability to regulate the amount of cannabinoids in the body. So there seems to be this clear connection, and almost seem like they really work together in a puzzle piece. And so what seems to happen is that rhythm can get strengthened by the use of CBD. Of course, again, still need more studies, need more, and a lot of what we're seeing too with people. Even I've had a few CBD experts on the podcast and speaking to some of their approach with and again, apologize that I keep saying CBD only, because of course, sometimes cannabis is in that conversation, of course, too. But some of these experts will often do just a lot of trial and error with each individual patient. So then testing them with different levels that will work for them. And of course, there's bio individuality with each person. But finding that sweet spot, and still we do have a lot of like anecdotal evidence around the impacts. So for me, with my clients, I have a lot of everyone that I work with has to wear a sleep tracker of some sort. So right now I mandate that everyone has the Aura Ring, as of 2020. And so we can at least see changes in heart rate, HRV, respiratory rate, body temperature, and a few other markers. So that gives us some indication of if things are kind of trending in the direction we want or not. So when we do see people being able to have something that helps mitigate the anxiety elements, then what we tend to see is a change in HRV, and that's that heart rate variability. But that's a really important marker in this conversation, because it points to a regulation of the state of our autonomic nervous system. It's one of the few readouts or metrics that we can kind of point to countably that can deliver that sort of information. So understanding that can be helpful of seeing, are we trending kind of away from the sympathetic response more regularly, or the dominancy of that. So I would say that those are some of the ways too that you can start to on the ground see, is this making a difference for you, and dosage and the trial and error that goes into that.
Wow. Good stuff. Do you ever run into anyone that has like a side effect that goes the wrong way? Like, for example, obviously with THC, THC could keep people from sleeping. I could see that happening, depending on the heart rate and, how people may get, and on the strain, if you're going with something that's more, sativa, terpene, that kind of thing, that's going to theoretically give you more energy. But absent of that, with CBD, perhaps, you ever see anybody that can't sleep after taking CBD?
Yeah, so what I will say is that one of the things that I've started to do with people is having them first focus on the day with CBD. And the reason I say that is just because from the psychological perspective, some of the people that I'm having do that tend to be dealing with anxiety in general anyway. And of course, how our days look tend to be mirrored in our nights. And so how we're breathing throughout the day tends to be reminiscent to a degree, unless there's some abnormality to our breath with sleep apneas or, obstructive breathing. But for the most part, if we run anxious during the day, then we tend to see those kind of same characteristics while we're sleeping. So I often will start people with CBD during the day so that we can start to manage some of that daytime anxiety. Because one of the things I've seen for some really anxious clients for me that I'm working with, is that they, if they're taking it in the night and something new, anytime there's something new, there can be the tendency of kind of hypervigilance on that thing. And especially if they're very new to this idea of
Right.
cannabis or CBD in general, then they might think, oh, I'm having some sort of response. And it's oftentimes, so if we can normalize the act of having that during the day and limit sort of that anxious, problem, so that they're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, even just like one or two times of having it in the beginning, and the newness effect of that, then we can kind of edge them in, and then taking it to the evening. Because that would be one of the things that I have seen that hasn't worked, is that if they're very new to this idea, no matter how many times you seem to say like, okay, this is not going to have a psychoactive component to it, it's going to, do this, that, and the other, just the, what perceives for some people as like the fringe nature of it, or what they've heard around these things, and they think still something's going to happen, and then they get even more riled up, if that makes sense. So
Yeah, it totally makes sense. It's
yeah. So
some people, create their own response somehow, right? And it's subconsciously,
yes.
right?
And our brain is so powerful in this conversation. And then because sleep can certainly take some time once you've gotten yourself riled up. I always speak to this one gadget that I think is really interesting called EBB, not because of the gadget and necessarily, but because it speaks to a problem with people that have chronic insomnia, that one of the measurable things that you can tend to point to is a rise in the brain temperature and the temperature in the brain from chronic insomniacs of having difficulty kind of regulating that thermoregulation and cooling down before bed. And we really need to, one of the cues to go to sleep is that the body temperature is cooling, the heart rate's lowering, all of these things are happening. But when we are all, jazzed up and anxious, that we can often have the opposite. And then if you flare up any more overthinking, sometimes that can further lead to just, hours of it being difficult to fall asleep. So just normalizing that this is really not going to have that effect, like, testing it out during the day when you don't have something on the line of like, oh, I got to sleep, has been one kind of tactic that I've used for people to have it not be such a scary thing.
Right. Well, that's great. How do you approach like your clients? Like, obviously there's an individualized approach, I'm assuming, to that, but how do you tell them what they need to do first? Right. Because I'm sure, sleep is a skill is the name of your website and your approach. Right. So where do you start? How do you think about that?
Oh, yeah. So we have two overarching frameworks that we work from. One just being kind of a general place to stand, that there is what we call a sleep tripod. So kind of with any workability of any tripod, having three legs that are kind of all functioning within in agreement with each other, one being psychology, one being physiology, and one being environment. And if any of those are kind of out of alignment, then of course the tripod won't stand quite as well. So kind of restoring workability in all legs of that area, or just having the knowingness that one leg might be particularly more out of alignment than others. Very common examples of that is, from the psychology perspective, something's happened. There's a divorce, there's a, lost their job, emptiness syndrome, whatever. Something happens. And so we can address that part of the paradigm. But then also from the physiological perspective, if, there's certain hormones that we might test for, blood work that we can look into. So if there's certain clear sort of deficiencies, vitamin D, magnesium, iron issues, all these sort of things that might impact our sleep results. So if we can start to restore that too, so then that can all play a role within the psychological perspective. And then I would make the argument that the environment piece for most people, certainly in the West in the 21st century, tend to have a lot of things that are happening in their environment that they might not be aware of that are likely impacting their sleep. And so we go to work on that. And then, so that's the overarching framework. And then the second framework piece of the puzzle is what we call circadian rhythm entrainment. And so that entraining process is, you can point to it in chronobiology, again, just that science of time. To entrain our circadian rhythm, one of the most important things is our relationship to light. And so then that's the top rung. And the reason for that is that our master clock in our brain, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, is directly connected to our eyes. And the eyes are part of the cue points. So understanding that the body is taking in this information. So they're known as time givers. And the number one most important time giver is that light. And then the second one is temperature. So first we're dealing with getting the light right in kind of our environment, and how so many of us have it very much opposite. And that's certainly what I had for so many years. I would wake up late and it would be sort of in dim lighting. I might have a headache or whatever. I'm slugging around.
Exactly.
And then, and so really kind of just like dimmed out. And then I turn on all the lights right as the sun is setting. And so it's like the exact opposite of what we were meant to really be encountering. And in a lot of ways, we have to think all about it and strategize, just based on our environments of how to bring this back. But really, it's more of a simplistic thing that we're hearkening back to, because, of course, in hunter-gatherer days, the sun would rise, and then that cue of the sun, of the light, along with its coupling of the rise in temperature in the environment, those two cues would then really act as the clear alarm clock that would naturally sort of wake us up, because we were working within nature. We were outside in nature so much more. Whereas versus today, the World Health Organization released in 2016 that an estimate that the average person in the West was spending over 90% of their days indoors. And that was before a pandemic, before, even
Already,
Oculus or, VR and all these sort of things that are so likely it's probably even higher numbers now. So having said that, the problem that creates is that we're kind of becoming these zoo animals that are totally devoid of those natural cues that kept us on time and on track for so many years. And now we're kind of off that. And now we're indoors. Even when you're behind windows, it changes the structure from a physics perspective of what light then does from a signaling cue for the hormones. On top of that, the ability to stay inside and just turn our Nest or whatever thermostat into, keeping this regulated temperature is very different than what we would have ever been accustomed to outside. So all of those things.
Then you throw in daylight savings time.
I know, it's the worst. And, and each state you're going into might have a different thing.
Where are you?
I'm over in the West Coast right now. I'm actually in Vegas, which has nonstop lights. So I'm excited about that. But you travel, we just went to Utah the other day, and then travel over the border, and then you're have a different time zone, go to Arizona, different time zone. I mean, it's just craziness. But I'm originally from Maine and New York. So I'm used to the, very dark and early darkness, cold winters and what have you. So I hear it all, but
it's the worst.
Yeah, exactly. So all of those things really, cause a real problem. And if you're where you're living geographically makes a big difference. If you're above the 37th parallel north, which is basically, cuts the line right across like mid California, across, and that's just in America.
Where that is,
yeah, exactly. And so if you're north of that, then going into December for the average person, it becomes more and more difficult beyond throughout the entire course of the winter to create enough of that vitamin D that we need, which really acts as a hormone, but it's a big conversation piece for sleep quality, because vitamin D is very important as a precursor around serotonin and melatonin. So if we don't have all those things in place, then you can find you're having insufficient melatonin. And then what happens when it gets dark at like 4:30, then many of us just, flip on all of our lights. And again, it's just like upside down. So melatonin is actually known as the hormone of darkness. So if you want to produce more melatonin and have the ability to fall asleep easier and not wake up throughout the course of the night, then you really want to make friends with darkness. And so many of us have are very deprived of true darkness throughout the course of the night. And it, might sound like a little thing, or certainly that would have been my thinking, like, oh, light, who cares? Like, what's the supplement to take or what have you? But it really is huge, huge, huge. And it's something that even, NASA has done tons of studies around to help optimize for their astronauts while they're in space, and the sun's rising and setting every 90 minutes while they're, traveling in the space shuttles. And so it becomes a big deal to how do we maintain a strong circadian rhythm in those type of environments. So what we can do here is then the most simple element is having as bright as possible days and as dim as possible nights. And of course, when you're sleeping, total black. But the dim nights and the bright days seem to be a real problem for many of us from a habits perspective of how to make the time in our days to actually get ourselves outside, to be exposed. And you really want it all over as much of your skin as you can possibly expose, because those photoreceptors in virtually every cell of your body are getting a sense of what time it is. And that's keeping certain organs on time, hormone production on time. It's, a big kind of fallout. And then the second part, like I said, of that rhythm or that framework that we're operating within is that temperature. What's super interesting about the temperature is that there's all these other things that will influence your temperature. Probably one of the most challenging for a lot of my clients is meal timing. And so the time of when you eat will impact the temperature of your body. So if you're eating late, which is what I used to do, especially if you have alcohol paired in there too, then you can anticipate a measurable change in your body temperature. And then that can be a missed kind of cue to the body of what time it is and when to go to bed. And shift workers can use this to their advantage. If they know they need to stay up and are tired, they can eat, and then the body will be kind of confused because it feels like, okay, well, if we just ate, we probably need that energy. So presumably we're staying up. But many of us now just do that kind of second nature as part of our evening routines without thinking of it.
Yeah, totally. Wow. That's, thanks for sharing that. That's some really good stuff. I mean, a lot of value there in terms of helping people understand that it's not just as simple as taking CBD, right? I mean, there's other things you have to do. And what you touched on it with a lot of different supplements there, right? Magnesium and vitamin D and some other things that you mentioned. What about just diet and exercise, right? How does that play into sleep patterns and the rhythms that you're looking for?
Yeah, great points. So exercise is another one that will influence that body temperature. So one, just ensuring the timing of our exercise is conducive to that strengthening of our circadian rhythm. So ideally, doing that earlier on in the day, and certainly the part of the goal is in the evening, doing around at least 4 hours before bed, ideally. Although I have had some clients that just out of the nature of the scheduling of their days, they've found themselves going to bed, going to work out right after work. Again, I know this since the pandemic, a lot of things have changed for many people,
Right.
but assuming that schedules kind of stay the same, that they're working out after work, and then they're finding themselves under lots of blue light, all highly like stimulated environment. And so what can happen when we kind of just shift the workouts just a bit to make it a little bit earlier. We never want to have people have the sense that they're cutting out the workout, because it's a big deal for normalizing our hormones and kind of feel good response. And there's a lot in blood flow and all kinds of great things that then can produce stronger, higher quality sleep and we see that with the athletes. So we don't want to at all have people not working out because of the timing, but then what time can we move it to or shift things around so that you can make it a little bit earlier on? So then you can also benefit from the thermoregulatory response of that, so that you're getting your body temperature up during the day and then dropping in the evening, because that now you're like allowing for more cooling response. So doing that strategically. And then also for the meal timing, one of the things that we'll suggest for that is something called circadian rhythm intermittent fasting. And it's just like a fancy series of words to basically mean that you're aiming to eat between sunrise and sunset. And naturally, I know that can be a little challenging, certainly in the winter. So people, sometimes the sun's setting, whatever, 4:30 or whatever.
Right.
So during that time, but you're still looking to have it be as coupled as close as possible to that. And part of the measurable elements, because I like to, even though I'm knocking, it sounds like I'm knocking tech from a perspective of now we have all these problems because we're indoors and blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, I think it's really exciting because the more we have people measuring some of the things that we're doing, the more they're in the game of improving some of these things. So one measurement system that you can use is a continuous glucose monitor. And then even if you were to do that for 14 days or 1 month, you can get a really good insight into, for many people, the highly unstable nature of their glucose, and what that has an effect on your sleep is really profound. So if you're someone that finds that you're waking up a lot through the night, then one of the first things that we tend to look at is how is your blood sugar? Because when we have that instability and then the crashes that can happen during the night while we're sleeping, the body can respond with adrenaline and cortisol. And then those are the type of wake ups that often you wake up and you're like up. And you have that moment of like, I am not falling back asleep. Those can often be kind of related to blood sugar. So if that is something that you're dealing with, then that can be one of the band-aids to one, identify is that you, and to two, kind of mitigate that response is that you can eat kind of a higher fat or protein item in the evening, looking like, collagen protein or like a spoonful of almond butter. Some people do sweet potatoes,
I love
different.
that snack, the almond
Yeah.
butter.
Right.
Great. Yep.
Exactly. And so then you can test and then you can see, because a lot of this around sleep too is starting to kind of, it's like a puzzle and pulling and seeing what is really at the source of what's not working for you. And these are some of the common ones. So then so if you then identify that you're having a little less wake ups, when you do that, then we don't want to always have you having to take, almond butter or whatever before bed for infinity. So we want to instead then shift to, okay, so if we've established that that's part of what's not working, how can we balance blood sugar throughout the course of the day so we're having less of those problems in the evening?
Wow. Really smart stuff, Molly. Thank you. So sleepisaskill.com. Is there, you have a podcast as well, right? Is it called Sleep is a Skill?
Yep. The Sleep is a Skill podcast. On our website, we do have a couple of things to just help if you're dealing with issues with your sleep right away. Then a couple of things that you can do to take action. One, we have a free downloadable PDF called the Optimized Bedroom. So 18 strategic tips and tricks from low tech and high tech to improve your bedroom space to make a difference with your sleep results, including having CBD nearby if that's can help in the process, among many other things you can do. So the downloadable PDF is there, and then that also signs you up for a weekly newsletter. If you couldn't tell, I'm pretty obsessed with this topic, so it's called Molly's Monday Obsessions. So every Monday for the last, I don't know, like 125 Mondays or something, we'll drop the kind of most interesting things in the world of sleep. And it's really exciting time because there's so much in the realm of kind of sleep tech and things that, and more studies that are coming out and more information that we can kind of learn from to improve our own sleep and really make it, I think, a really fun, this is how nerdy my levels of fun are, fun game to improve this area, which I think is really just,
it's what it takes.
Yeah,
it's what
fun,
it
takes.
And yeah, it's got to be fun for people to do it. Right?
Exactly. And then if you are clear that things are just not working for you, we do have sleep assessments on there so that you will get real live people, kind of responding around what's happening with your sleep. And we do have small group cohorts and online courses and one-on-one options too, if you want to really dive in deeper.
That's great. I really appreciate it. I love the passion that you have for this topic. And it's something that, I've not suffered a lot of this in my lifetime, fortunately. But when I have, it's been really, really bad. And my wife has gone through periods where it's been really, really bad. So I know and can sympathize with the people who are listening. And I'm sure you've given them a lot of great advice here today. And I hope that anybody out there that is listening will check out sleepisaskill.com if they're looking for help. So thank you, Molly. And you have a great day. It was great meeting you. I'll send you an email later and let's stay in touch.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate this. And I love the work that you guys are doing for, so many people. It makes such a big difference. And I appreciate being connected.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye. Thank you for listening to today's show. Always brought to you by Magic Immuna Tea, available at packedwithlife.com. A mushroom tea that tastes great. Try it. Magic Immuna Tea, packedwithlife.com.